Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you today because you have mentioned this to me, I think over like a year ago. Mm-hmm. Last year, you mentioned this to me, the fact that you were really into kind of the paranormal side of things a little bit, mm-hmm. near-death experiences, reincarnation, what have you. This just blew me away because we used to talk about conflict resolution, psychological safety. And then the fact that you're really deep into this other stuff was just like so out of the blue for me. But you're really deep into how did you get into this?
Yeah, so I think 10 years ago when I came to China, someone introduced me to the book of Anita Moorjani called Dying to Be Me or to Become Me. And I also watched some of her speeches on YouTube on her experience. She is an Indian woman who was born in Singapore, grew up in Hong Kong, and was always between the cultures. She had cancer for 4 years and was then in her final stage, and the organ shut down. She was dying, basically. But then came back, and within a week she healed, and the doctors couldn't believe what they saw. They couldn't measure any cancer cells in her body anymore, which was actually impossible for what she went through before. And she healed miraculously, and then this was also checked by other doctors later, where she reported this near-death experience on a website, and they found that so interesting that they wanted to check it, and they went to Hong Kong and looked at the records and could confirm everything, and it was also confirmed in her book by this other doctor.
So this is an officially documented case that's been confirmed, absolutely. And
it's very famous actually in the scene around near-death.
So this isn't just some rumor or story somewhere.
No.
This has been a confirmed case.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, scientifically.
Yeah, and it's not explainable through medicine. That's for sure. Yeah, and found this so interesting and also so enriching. Maybe also because now being in my 50s, I kind of have more openness to what's the meaning of life and all that. So that really since then never let me go anymore. And I have to say that probably for the past 3 or 3.5 years, I've been watching or listening or reading about that topic and other topics almost on a daily basis. So I've really seen a lot, I've really heard a lot, read a lot, and of course also discussed a lot with people who are also into this. And I also recently made some experiences or provoked some experiences, and I can share a little bit about that as well. So the whole spectrum that I'm now covering or interested in is starting from near-death experiences, but then also going to shared death experiences, which I can explain in a second what that is. Then, of course, also reincarnation, and then also the time between lives. So between reincarnating another time and having passed away in your past life, so this time in between, this is called life between lives. So Michael Newton was someone who actually came across this by accident in the end of the 60s. He was a psychologist and doing hypnotherapy, and then was having this this guy who all of a sudden appeared in a past life, and he didn't really want this, and he didn't believe that at the beginning, but then he got sucked into this as well, and then he actually also was experiencing something with a client who was between two lives, and then he really focused on that, and he had, I think, 8,000 regressions between end of the 60s and the 90s, but he never talked about that. He never really made it public because he was probably too scared for his reputation, and only in the 90s then started writing books and coming out with all that.
I want to hold up 1 second. I mean, there was a lot right there. And I just want to kind of step back for a second before we get too deep, right? So you just threw a bomb on me right now. I'm coming in very blind here, okay? So we're talking about reincarnation, near-death experiences, shared death experiences, et cetera, right? So things around death, right? Pretty much, right? Now let's take a step back for a second. Justin.
Yes, Howie.
I mean, have you had anything like that happen to you before? Like anything close to near-death experiences, or anything that has like flashes that are kind of metaphysical or outside of what is known, or anything like that?
No. I mean, then this might be offensive to Tilman here to even compare. But I think the closest thing of like even that realm to me would be my experiences with deja vu that have like really impacted me somehow. But like that is nothing. I know that's like nothing.
You can slap
at
him.
all. Yeah, you
want to slap him? Is that really like really off?
But so to answer your question, no, I have not had any near death experiences and anything of that sort. No.
Okay, so nor I. I have not either. So is that something like a stepping point, like the first stage of getting into this whole realm, the near-death experience? Is that kind of like the first step in, and then you kind of go into shared, and then you kind of go into all the other avenues, or do you think it's something else?
I don't know if it's the first step. There are probably other steps into this, maybe through mediumship. For example, when someone passed away and you want to connect to that person who passed away through a medium. I think that is another way how people approach that topic. And that is, of course, also assuming a belief that there is something going on beyond our death. But the near-death experience, and the interesting thing is that you may not have heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who has been studying people while they were dying, and has written many books about that, and has really done a lot for making this less of a taboo as it was at the time. And in the 60s, when she published her first book about death and dying, she was about to write one chapter about near-death experiences. And the editor said, please don't publish that. You have to let that go, because your reputation will be so ruined if you publish that chapter. So please don't do it. And she didn't do it. And only 10 years later, in I think 1976, Raymond Moody was the first person who then wrote a book about that called Life After Life. And he was the first person to coin the term a near-death experience. And actually,
that was in the 70s.
That was 1976.
Wait, but hold on. The chapter, who was the lady, the author?
Kubler-Ross, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
That chapter that her editor told her that she didn't end up releasing.
Yes.
Was that ever released later to the public?
No, actually her son is still looking for it. She passed away already, and
so no one besides her or people close to her know what's in that chapter.
Yeah.
Wow, that would be exciting to see what was in there.
Yes, and at the same time, it's probably the same thing that afterwards Raymond Moody and others have talked about. So I don't think it's now, looking at it now, so exciting. It's just exciting that the fact that at the time it was so not acceptable in society, and nowadays that's not a question anymore.
Well, on that point, I mean, for you in your professional career, you're a conflict mediator, you're a leadership coach. Have you ever had any hesitancy kind of talking about this publicly, that you think it would have any negative impact on your own reputation or career? Did that ever cross your mind at all?
So I have not talked about that so publicly, only once in a Toastmaster speech some months ago, and that was kind of my first coming out. And apart from that, of course, here and there, I have talked about that with some clients, and some of them were open, others weren't, but not publicly in that sense. Yeah. And to answer your question, I don't know if it's going to have an impact on my reputation. It may have, but now I'm really at a point where I say I'm so convinced of all that, and the truth is more important than the reputation. So I just believe it will help people, actually. And the experience I have is that when you share it, you actually bring people to talk about something they never talked with anyone else before. And they would come to me and say, you know what, it happened to me. And I've never told anyone, but now that you share that with me, and so on. So then you have a really deep conversation, and also very vulnerable conversation sometimes. And actually, I often hear people then saying afterwards something like, that really changed my life. It changed my perspective on life. And they're very grateful for opening up a world to them that they had no access to before. So I believe it's contributing to make the world a better place, to make people aware of something that they are not aware of yet.
Can we talk a little bit about the near-death experience, just what that means?
Yeah. So a near-death experience is what would be described as someone who is having a condition where his heartbeat is not beating anymore, or his heart's not beating anymore, where he or she would be considered as clinical dead. And then while this is happening, and in some cases even when the brain is completely destroyed, there's one famous case of Eben Alexander, a neuroscientist or neurosurgeon, who had an experience while he had a meningitis that really destroyed his brain in this time, and there were scans, and he had a very vivid experience. So the brain cannot produce what's happening and what people are actually experiencing. So what happens...
So because I don't want to brush over, I think each of these things you're saying has a lot to unpack in itself. Let's rewind first for 1 second. In terms of the clinical definition of being dead, is that just with no heartbeat, or is that zero brain activity? Like at what point is someone clinically dead or pronounced dead?
Well, I'm not a doctor, so I can't give you the exact definition of this, but brain waves would also not work anyway. There's nothing working anymore. The heart is not beating. The brain waves would not be active. The brain activity, in some cases, has been measured as being zero, and still people had that experience. And we will maybe later come to the shared death experience, where people who are actually next to someone dying have a similar experience together with that person, independent from that. So it is really not to do with the condition of maybe that's too much oxygen, or maybe it's anesthesia, or maybe it's kind of like the brain does all kinds of tricks.
Well, you're talking about the reasons some people, maybe critics, would provide to say, oh, it's a hallucination of the brain or something like that.
Exactly.
And you're saying that in some of these cases, there was reported zero brain activity, so it couldn't have been any sort of hallucination or residual brain activity that was producing these effects, correct?
Yeah, and in fact, what happens then is when people are seen to be dead or are dead, that they then leave their body. So this is typically the first thing that happens that people experience. But this every individual experiences this differently. So it's really you can say no two near-death experiences are exactly the same. There are certain standards that apply often. So one of the things that most people say is you cannot express in words what's going on. So this is one thing that almost everyone says. And what they also experience is that time does not exist anymore. So the dimension of time, of linear time, it's all at once in all eternity. This is kind of like how they describe it. And so the out-of-body experience is the first thing. Often, some people don't have that. They directly land somewhere else. But then the typical next step is, and this out-of-body experience means you can see yourself laying down there, maybe people operating, and you can observe details. And sometimes you can also move through walls and see your family sitting outside and seeing which book they are reading, that they go to the vending machine and get a chocolate and things like that. They can afterwards tell and prove that this has been all seen by them while they were dead. So this is like, and even people that were blind were able to say things about the people while they were in this out-of-body experience that could afterwards be verified. So there is so much proof to this experience that it's really true. Only 20%, around 20% have a near-death experience. 80% don't have any experience.
Like some sort of out-of-body experience, like what we were just talking, what you were just describing.
15 to 20%, yes.
15 to 20%. Okay. And yeah, so we know all this just basically from people who self-reported. Is that how we collect, they gathered information?
And of course, then you can say, well, this is just anecdotal. But
you can also say the number is probably bigger because of the people who self-report. There's probably a significant portion of those people who don't report it at all, who just keep it to themselves.
That's true. And one thing they also say, it's hyper real. So it's like that our reality in comparison to the reality they experience in this moment looks like a dream.
Wow.
So this is like the real thing, what they experience.
like you're outside the matrix.
And they also expand some kind of expansion. Like they feel like, and it's often an all-connectedness, all-knowingness. Many report then after that out-of-body experience, or because they of course share it in a linear way, but it's all kind of all at once, and so it's hard for them to really put it into words. But then what they often experience is this tunnel, like a tunnel in which they are, and then all of a sudden see a light. Sometimes they meet passed away relatives or friends or family. Sometimes they also meet religious figures, and so this is all happening at that time for some people. Then there's also something called the life review, and that's one of the things I'm most excited about, because what they experience then and what they report afterwards is that they have been able to see their whole life once again with many details they already forgot, and sometimes even just small scenes that were shown to them. And what they experienced was they could see their life, but they would also feel what everyone was feeling to whom they have done something. So whatever they have done to others, they would go through that feeling themselves. And they would also understand why that person had that feeling, maybe also because of a past trauma of whatever it was. So they could kind of like all see all the ripple effects of all that.
Ultimate empathy, right?
Yes, and it's also that you could feel this ripple effect of what it had that you did, be it good or bad. Another thing that often is said, that in this realm there is no duality between good and bad, and the only person who judges you is yourself.
So let me ask you something. I don't know if you know this information or not, but of like, let's say the 15 to 20% of people who have reported a near-death experience, what percentage of those people are religious?
It would be the average of what there is. So there is no difference in terms of religion and atheists. This is like across the board in all countries.
So it was an even spread of people who were religious and people who were not as religious.
Exactly. No difference.
I mean, could it be explained, or maybe not explained, but at least hypothesized, where similar to what we go through when we dream, we see imagery in our mind, in our mind's eye, and then we wake up and you feel it, you kind of understood what you maybe went through, but maybe not, and it starts to go away like a fleeting thought. It's the brain kind of, giving synapses and pulses, and then, you have parts of your brain lit up and not.
Well, you say you lucid dream, right? Like I don't lucid dream.
Yeah,
you
I've
lucid dream.
Yeah, I've lucid dreamed. Yeah, but what I'm trying to get at is, could it be explained in a way, or hypothesized that dying moment where certain parts of the brain start shutting down, mixed signals kind of, hit each other in a certain progression or something, I don't know.
In a certain frequency.
Or a certain order or something like that, that causes a similar reaction of a light at the end of the tunnel, a memory like relapse, or things like that, patterns to happen, that maybe that's an explanation from a scientific way. Is that possible?
Actually, I mean, that's what materialists try to explain this way, or explain away the phenomenon. But actually, everything that so every explanation can be disproved by some other facts of it, and no explanation that exists, alternative explanation, can stand the evidence that is out there in different fields. So to go back to your specific question. The one thing, first of all, that I said is it is perceived as hyper real, so not like a dream, and this is something they can still remember, even if it's decades ago, as if it was yesterday. So many come out just now because now they feel safe to talk about it, but they had experience when they were children, and they say they have forgotten so much about their childhood, but this experience they have never forgotten. It's like so vivid still, and they can still remember every detail. Yeah. So,
but for me, that's still scientifically, without being, in the medical field or science field, I feel like it could be explained. You just said that it's different than a dream, the hyper realism. But when you're actually in the dream, or especially lucid dreaming, it does feel hyper real. It does feel extremely real when you're in that moment. I'm just trying to think. I'm not trying to disprove. I don't think we're here to kind of debate that. But I do want to bring up questions or different angles. Yeah, explore that a little bit.
But
right?
like the contrarian in me, right?
Yeah,
like it equates it to like some experiences,
are just
like unless you had it yourself, you could never explain to someone else, and they could never understand.
Yeah, I get that.
And so people who have gone through it talk about it with such conviction. I just feel like, as an outsider of people who didn't have that experience, for us to be like trying to explain it away, there's something offensive about it, right? There is something that, like, because I can put myself in their shoes. If I died, if I flatlined and came back, and I'm trying to tell you, like, oh my God, like, you don't understand what I've been through, and you're just trying, well, maybe it was your brain, and maybe it was like this, or that. I'd be like, F you, just get out of here, right? There is a little bit of that.
And actually, that's what many doctors do that are not educated in this. They brush it away when people wake up and say where they were, or what they experienced. And actually, this even Alexander, who I talked of before, he said he did the same thing when he kind of told the people, yeah, the brain does all kinds of tricks when you're dying or when you're in the state and so on, until he had that himself. And the same was true for someone else called Raji. I don't get his full name. His book is Dying to Wake Up. And he was the same guy, and he was very materialistic at the time and afterwards. And that's the very interesting one thing that is a real proof that everyone who comes back from a near-death experience transforms their life. And you wouldn't do that just based on a dream. And this is really like the one thing that is very tangible, that all people transform their life afterwards. And some have really hard time afterwards, kind of integrating what they experienced, and some even go into divorce or have really like big life changes because they are just not the same person anymore. And this is what you could say is really measurable, the change and the transformation that people make.
So let's do a little bit of house cleaning, right? Because I think there's a lot of themes jumbled up in here. When we talk about all of this, what are we what are we actually talking about? So in my mind, I'm boiling it down to a few things. I'm boiling it down to this idea of an afterlife. Like there is like it doesn't have to be heaven, doesn't have to be like right, but there's an idea of there is an existence after death. And then also once we get into the reincarnation topic, which we haven't started on yet, is that there not only is there an afterlife, but there are multiple lives. Is this fundamentally what we're talking about?
Yeah, definitely. And so the one thing is that the brain is not producing the mind or the soul or who we are as a person. Actually, it's rather receiving it. That's kind of the theory of the dualist versus the materialist. And
like the brain is some sort of antenna.
Yes.
What is the dualist and the materialist?
So the materialists are believing in everything, only what can be measured is true, and everything.
Like a scientist.
Well, actually, the point is that is not very scientific, because there are other proofs out there that they constantly ignore and they don't want to let into their world view and their paradigm, and that is actually a very unscientific part of their behavior. So this materialistic approach is actually outdated.
Well, it's a dogma, maybe?
Yeah, and yeah, you could call it a dogma, and but people hold on to it because if they would give up, it would really challenge them so much. And I experienced that when I talk to people who have that view. They kind of say, I mean, like, show me whatever you want. I don't believe it anyway. It cannot be true.
Yeah.
So the materialists are the ones that say near-death experiences, reincarnation, bullshit.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
I don't care what you say. I don't care what kind of sources you give. It's all bullshit.
So that's Howie, basically, what we're saying.
It's not me. It's not me.
I know, I'm fucking with you.
I know. Right? So that's
Yes,
materialist.
exactly.
Okay, and what's dualist?
So the dualists are those that see there's the spiritual side and the material side, or the form and the non-form, if you want to say so, and this can coexist next to each other, and the consciousness, the energy we are, never dies and lives on and takes new forms. And actually, if you look at our body, we are actually just energy. If you go to the smallest atom, even the smallest atom is consisting of quarks, and they are just in movement. So actually, we are just space and energy cannot die.
And the dualist would believe that consciousness lives outside the body, right?
Yes. And is perceived from outside, here from outside. And,
Okay, so we are a meat transmitter.
Like meat antenna.
or
meat antenna.
or a container of the soul, whatever you want to say. Yeah.
So, okay. So, Tilman, why do you believe in this personally so strongly? What about your experience makes you, so convinced in all this?
I think the first thing is that I'm generally an open and curious person, and I do not brush off things so quickly. I just try to stay open, and I think it's also fair to say we don't know what we don't know, and there is so much out there that we cannot explain, and I think it's just important to stay open. So this is my general attitude, and then I got across interviews and testimonials of people that seemed so credible that I just couldn't believe that they were all lying or they were all making things up. They were so credible. And actually, when many anecdotes come together, they become data. And so it is really not something where you can just say, this is all. They just want to be important. And actually, the opposite is true for many. It's very risky to come out and to share. I want to share one situation, or let's say one story of a psychiatrist who in the 80s was the head of psychiatry, I believe, in the US. He was coming from Columbia, and I think he was then in Miami, but he was really a professor for psychiatry, and he had a client who had many phobias, and and he was trying to work with this client on with conventional therapy, and nothing worked. And then he said, all right, let's try to, because she couldn't really remember her childhood so well, so he said, let's try hypnotherapy. And said, okay, now you go to the moment where this was happening, or where you had this pain or this trauma or so. And then all of a sudden she kind of described him a past life where she was, and where she was seeing her in a life that was like 100 years before. At the beginning, he was a very, very rational guy. He could not believe this. For her, it was real, but he kind of tried to rationalize, compartmentalize it. And then he was continuously doing this work with her, and each time she was in another life. One time he asked her, how many lives did you live? And she said 76. But what actually really threw him off his chair was when she was, so each time when he was having her die in that past experiences, and by the way, one thing I have to also mention, he was finding with her these moments where that it could explain why she was afraid of drowning, why she was afraid of choking and of darkness and all these things that she had phobias about. And each time they found the reason in a past life, it was healed afterwards. So she was really each time she got better and better after these going through these lives. And when she was dying in her past lives, she would say, I'm floating. And then she was kind of in this space between two lives. And all of a sudden, in one of these moments, she was saying, I'm here with your son and your father, and they both have something at their heart. And your son is very, very small, and he has a chicken heart. And that struck him, because apart from him and his wife, no one knew. By the way, at the time there was no internet, and he had nothing in his room about himself. She could not research anything. That his son passed away when he was 4 months old because of a very rare disease called chicken heart, which is when the heart is turned around. And at that time, he was at the edge of deciding, should he go for medicine or psychiatry, or for more medical career or the psychiatry. And then he was so disappointed of medicine that he decided this other way. And
because medicine couldn't save his son.
Yeah, exactly. And his father also died because of a heart issue. And so that was where he couldn't ignore it anymore. He couldn't kind of say, this cannot be true. This is just all imagination. I mean, it helps, so good. But that was when he had to get... Yeah, he was... and then he had more and more of these conversations with her while she was in this state in between, where this lady was actually a very simple person, would talk with wisdom that he could not really... and she was also talking with a different voice. And so he said, who are they? Because she was talking about them. Yeah, the masters, she said. And so that's why he called his book Many Lives, Many Masters. And this book is actually describing this whole process, and he recorded everything. So he transcribed all these recordings in the book, and says everything is true. He may have reduced some, but it's all true. And he was waiting for 4 years to come out with that. And what happened was after 2-3 years, he started to tell some of his colleagues, his close colleagues, that he experienced that. And they said, we experienced the same, but I'm not going to talk about that because it's too dangerous for our reputation. And he, after 4 years, took the courage to come out with that and publish that book, and the rest is history, because he became famous. He was on Oprah Winfrey show.
Yeah,
and,
it's a very famous book.
Yeah. And so this is a fascinating book. He actually wrote some more afterwards where he had clients, a Chinese client who came with no English. She couldn't speak English, so she came with her translator or interpreter. And all of a sudden, she would find herself back in a life in the US or in England and speak English to him. And then the translator didn't get it in the moment and translated back into Chinese to him. And he said, well, you don't have to do this anymore. I understand her now. And so this...
That's real.
Yeah.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. And another thing was he had two clients that did not know each other, and they were sharing about a life, the same life. They were friends and couple and married and then some people from the east came and and destroyed the village, and he was away while that happened. She was taken away, and they experienced this from these two angles, but it was the same story, and he knew it because of the names they gave each other. And he later actually brought them together to just meet each other, but nothing really happened apart from him commenting on her like, wow, that was an attractive woman. Like, he just managed them to see each other when they would come in and out. And 2 years later, they met in a plane, fell in love with each other, and have 2 children. So,
have you gone through anything at all in your personal life? Have you experienced anything?
No, I had no near-death experience, and nothing really that I could share from firsthand in this regard. What I did do, like 1.5 years ago, a client of mine and a friend passed away very suddenly. So I went to see a medium through Zoom, and at the beginning, this medium was kind of saying, "Okay, let me see what comes in." The interesting thing that happened was that he then said, "Who's this musician?" I said, "I have no idea." Well, there's a musician. I clearly hear music. He has a hat on, has a guitar, and is tall. I have no idea who's that. And so we kind of moved on to the next. So I stayed very skeptical. But after that call was over, I thought, oh my God, was that maybe the bass player of my former band? He always wear a hat. I haven't been in contact with him for 2 years. And let me try to find out. And I checked on LinkedIn. He didn't like anyone for 2 years. His website was hacked. His other website wasn't existing anymore. I called a friend, and he was saying he hadn't contact with him also which was rare. He normally would have contact with him twice a year. For the last 1.5 years, he didn't have. He checked with someone in the city where he lived. His office was closed down. So many signs. I also contacted his sister, who claimed that actually he would still be alive, but then she wouldn't let me in any way have contact with him. Like, it was very, very strange. And so I started believing there's something wrong, and maybe she has her reasons not to share why or that he passed away. But it was very, very strange.
Well, I feel like, I don't know if this would be in the same realm, but there are a lot of people that believe fortune telling, especially in Asia.
Well, isn't your family like pretty believing into that?
Yeah,
you've done it.
Yeah. So my family's very into fortune telling.
Yeah, I see how to pry that out of him.
Yeah. And one of the things that's always shared, because I'm the ultimate skeptic, I'm always saying like, yeah, stop pushing me to go see this person. I don't need to see them, right? Because I'm always saying, you know, a lot of people, they read body language, they read, facial expressions, and they kind of, they're really good at reading people, so they put 2 and 2 together, and then they make guesses, and then they'll pivot depending on how you react. Anyway, there's a way of reading people. There's certain people that do that. Now, with that being said, one of the things that I've shifted a little bit is that I think that there are certain people out there that are attuned, right? And it's not everybody, and I don't believe it's something that you just kind of like study to get into. I think it's just some people have it or don't, right? And I'm not saying that I'm a 100% believer now, but I can kind of see it. I can kind of get it, because there have been some stories in my family that made me go, okay, well, I have to challenge myself a little bit as well.
Yeah, so maybe let me share one story of a professor in Germany who, a IT professor who also studied medicine, a very credible person and a scientist, and he also very rational normally. He had an experience when he was bringing his daughter to school by car. There was an accident in front of him, or they came a little bit later. And then later his daughter came back and said, actually, you know who that was? That was the girl from my class. She passed away in the hospital. And after that, he felt such a depression, such a deep feeling of sadness that he couldn't explain, because he did not know this girl. And it was going on for months and months, and he was really changing so much. Later, his wife gave him as a Christmas present an aura reading with a medium, and actually he wasn't really interested in that, but he wanted to talk with someone about what has happened to him and all this situation, and she couldn't read his aura. She said, I cannot, but there's someone here. If you're open to that, I can tell you there is a girl here standing in the room, or I can feel the presence. And she's saying she used to be a daughter in your past life, and she had an accident with a bicycle in this life, and she didn't want you to experience it a second time. She did not know anything about that. So he made a study, or started a study, a research project with the same very stringent methods he would use this in his institute where he worked before. And this became the biggest study on mediumship in the whole world. And what they found out really was that people, be it skeptics or people that believe in that, when they would go to see a medium because, for example, their child passed away, maybe one parent is open, one parent is not, they go there together. And 3 weeks later, they sent them a questionnaire with asking if there was anything that came out of that session that can be considered a family secret, like something the medium could not have known, or something that was really proved and verified later. And around 93% of the people said yes, and also that it was consoling and comforting for them. One thing that he also says, and that's actually what really drives him, is that this is comforting people who have a loss where nothing can comfort them, but this is something that can comfort them. And the specifics that for example, he gave some examples, like parents that came there, the son passed away, and the son would say through the medium, there was my favorite teacher on my funeral, and he was wearing an orange jacket. And the parents did not know who was the favorite teacher. And there were 300 people on that funeral, so they had no idea who was wearing what. So, and they were anyway kind of in a different realm. And then they had to research, find out who was the favorite teacher, and then asked that teacher, what were you wearing? And he confirmed he was wearing an orange jacket. Or another case where someone was saying, the child shows me a fish, a single fish in an aquarium. And the mother said, yes, this child had one fish in an aquarium. So, this is something you cannot guess. But the other one is so special because in this situation, the parents even did not know the situation. It could not have even been through telepathy. and left alone cold reading. Anyway, so this is the story, and this book that he wrote a book about his study and about his experience, and also very much about the topic of materialist and dualist and all that. It's called Beyond Matter, highly recommendable. It's a very, very good book, and he was, of course, also afraid of his reputation, and he also said, "But this is bigger than my reputation. I need to find out," and he really believes in this being a contribution to comforting people who have lost someone, and that's why he does that and continues to do this study that became, meanwhile, the biggest study in the world on this subject.
Yeah. Why do you think, with so much anecdotal evidence, why do you think this is not more believed in?
I think it's increasingly more believed in, or it's, let's say, increasingly less of a taboo, but because it is challenging the paradigm of so many people and scientists or materialists who just cannot let go of that, because their whole worldview and idea of what is right and wrong and exists and doesn't exist is challenged and questioned in a way that is too scary to give up.
Yeah. It's also one of those things that you kind of have to experience yourself to become a believer.
Well, I didn't experience it myself, really.
Okay.
So I was already believing in it without experiencing it. And so I don't think you have to experience it. And one thing I want to say is, I think the benefit for me personally of exposing myself to this topic so much is, first of all, like those people that have a near-death experience, they all lose fear of death. Yeah, this is one of the things that is also very tangible. And I would say that for me, this is one thing, not that I was really, really afraid of death, but I would say I'm much more relaxed about all this. And many things I am much more relaxed about. And also this life review is something that also I try to integrate into my life more and more, like just reminding myself of this whenever there's a situation.
Yeah, that you're going to be reviewing yourself.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. So
but what about all this makes it relaxing? Like, to use the term that you just used, like you're more relaxed about this, or more relaxed about the concept of death. What about all this feels relaxing to you? Is it the fact that you know there's something beyond that comforts you? Like, why does it comfort you like that?
I think knowing that life goes on, and that also those that maybe that passed away, they are still there. Yeah.
I'm wondering, can a material, like we were talking about dualists versus materialists, can the materialists also believe in religion and religious text? You know what I'm saying? Because religion, and I think the religious ideas of what happens to you after death, depending on which religion, obviously, but every religion has some sort of take on what death is and what happens or what doesn't happen. I think religion is something so common, right, and so widespread that we don't really take so much issue with it. I mean, some people do, but in general, we don't really question. We just let you believe what you believe in, even though those can be some pretty far out ideas themselves. So what I'm saying to say is, like, why would this be any different from us accepting, right? Like, why would this be taboo, but like religious ideology wouldn't be taboo?
So there are definitely materialists that are atheists, yeah, and then there are also materialists that go to church and somehow kind of make it can somehow imagine the two while still being materialist. That does exist, but I would say the hardcore materialists were probably then also atheists. Yeah.
I feel like everything is actually all connected in some way. Like even religion and also what you've been talking about, they're all connected in some way or form. If you want to use the word spirituality, if you want to use the word a rhythm or vibration or something like that, there's something that is unexplainable to us in a scientific way that, exists, right? In some sort of form or matter or existence that's unexplainable. Because I was just thinking, I was listening to your stories and these believable, I can believe it, stories that you're sharing. I can, especially if you're saying that these are like truth stories that you've experienced, you've heard. I just couldn't help but also simultaneously think about the stuff that I was alluding to with my family and stories that have come through, whether it's fortune telling or anything to do with spirits or anything like that. That kind of blew my mind, that made me be less of a skeptic and more of a borderline believer, because nothing is firsthand. Everything is through my family, right? Because I try to keep myself away from all that stuff consciously. And it just makes me just wonder. It just makes me think there's got to be something that which is unexplainable. Just like, there's physics that are still getting explored and new frontiers.
Well, just like how we always say, like, we know so little.
Yeah.
About like the nature of reality.
Exactly.
Right? Like the grand thing. Like we just know so little. Like I always thought about it this way, right? When you look up at the night sky, the clear night sky, you see a black void, right? And then you see like little specks of light. Those are the stars, right? I think our knowledge of reality is those specks of light in the sky. And the vastness and the void of black that fill all the gaps between the specks of light is everything we don't know. So we don't know so much more than we know. And so I am totally like you. I have also the predisposition. My nature is always to be just right off the bat, consider everything. Like, why reject it right away? Right? Well, what good does that do you? And so consider everything and make your own decisions later on. Our knowledge of what is real and what is true is always evolving. Who's to say there is all this other stuff? I think where it gets lost is when things like movies kind of Hollywoodify the whole thing to like spirits and make it all this woo-woo. We get caught up into this one image of it, right? Just like how we think of like alien life form. We think of like an ET or something and a flying saucer, and it becomes a little bit cartoonish the way we think about things. But it's just the idea that there is so much more that we just can't explain, and what is the true nature of it, and how does it actually work, and we're all just guessing, and some people might have their takes on it based on their own personal experiences, is totally a reasonable, I think, position to hold. I just don't think there's anything like, I don't see why that should be controversial at all.
Yeah, there's the one thing is that materialists often say that, one day everything can be explained of all these now paranormal phenomena. But in fact, as long as it is not yet explained, the best explanation is what they don't accept. So it's kind of like they reject the best explanation based on what is known and what is proven, with the argument, well, this cannot be true because one day we will find out the real reason.
Yeah.
And that is actually not a scientific way of looking at it, because you have to first take the most probable of all the possibilities into consideration and at least look at it. And that's even what they don't do. Yeah.
So does that mean, obviously we've been talking about near-death experiences, we hinted at reincarnation, we hinted at the afterlife, right?
We haven't talked about shared death experiences, which is actually a very important and interesting thing.
Okay, let's shift over there. I mean, I know nothing about shared death experiences.
Let's dive headfirst into that one.
So Raymond Moody, who was the one who wrote the book about near-death experience, he actually also coined the term shared death experiences, and in his book, and that is highly recommendable, called Proof of Life After Life. So the first book was called Life After Life. This book was called Proof of Life After Life. And here he describes one experience he himself had when his mother was dying, And his family was sitting around and they were all holding hands in this moment when this happened. And they all had an experience that was very close to what you would call a near-death experience, but they all had it at the same time, like they were kind of like in a different dimension. And they, when it was over, they all had the same experience, and they were all healthy people. There was nothing with oxygen, there was nothing with anesthesia, and so on. And he was bringing up so many examples of people who experienced that in parallel. Not only themselves, some people just experienced it while someone was dying and then just found out like years or decades later that they had exactly the same experience in this moment.
Wait, so how do those accounts of a shared death experience work? Do you have to be in the same room as the person that's dying?
No, not even necessarily.
Contact? Like, how does that work?
There are even situations where people, of course, have dreams. That's one of the very typical things that people say when this person died. I had a dream, and that was so clear. That was so different from all the other dreams. And in this moment, I knew my grandfather died, and he came to say bye because I wasn't there when I couldn't be there. Or it was even there's something like called apparitions, that people that die come and visit the person who is somewhere else and actually appear in front of their bed and are like as real as they can imagine, and are just there, and then the next day they find out this person died in this very moment. Like these things, and actually what Raymond Moody was also doing, sharing in his book, and that's like mind-blowing, because he's a philosopher as well, or studied philosophy. He knew about what the old Greeks were doing, and they had a practice of using a room with mirrors, or with a mirror in the dark room with a mirror, to kind of connect with the other side. And he was simulating that according to what he knew from there. And he would invite students and people who were interested in trying out to his home, where he prepared this kind of room. And he brought them into a meditative state, and then brought them into this room. And then he left them alone. And he said 50%, which is like absolutely high number, had an experience in this room with being in contact with them.
I'd be terrified in that room.
Like some people...
That's just terrifying.
Yeah.
A dark room with a mirror in there, and you're in there alone.
And the interesting thing is, in the Chinese culture, there is this saying you should not have a mirror in your bedroom.
Yeah.
And when I was told this, I just laughed it off, like, haha, yeah, that's kind of like... But then when I read this in the book, I realized, oh my God, there is something to it. There is something to it.
You know, it's real quick. Let me just add something, because I just said at first, I know nothing about shared death experiences, but when you started describing it a little bit, I couldn't help but... I think I mentioned it once on the show. You tell me, Justin, if I did or not. But I think I had one then. Mm-hmm. When I was like 7 or 8, mm-hmm. I just remember this vividly. The last time I threw up. I mean, like the last time I remember thinking I never want to throw up again.
Okay.
Like, how about that? And I remember sitting on the toilet and then, vomiting everywhere. And at that time, during that time, my grandma had recently had a stroke, and so she was in the hospital. And so I was at home. My parents were not there. They were with the grandma, and they didn't want to bring me there. I was, I think my aunt and uncle were there or something, they're watching me. And I remember throwing up. And I remember later that night, my parents came home and told me that grandma passed away. And I mean, I never confirmed it as if it was like the same time. But now, like, thinking back, because after that moment, I remember thinking I never want to throw up again for some reason. It was just one of those things that I was like, and up to this day, I still refuse to throw up, like, until I cannot hold it at all. And then I'll excrete. But otherwise, yeah, I have a fear of throwing up. And I've always related back all through my life to that one moment. Even though I threw up a lot of times before that as a kid. You know what I mean? Like, I used to throw up, we were kids, right? But for some reason, that was just so special. And then, like I said, I connected it to my grandma passing. So now that you're saying this, it makes me think, maybe it's almost like this connection, because she was also the one that was raising me, and so we were very, 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 very close. And I actually was mute for about 2 months after she passed, because this is my mom told me. I don't remember this. I never told you this.
No, you were mute for 2 months.
I didn't talk.
Okay.
And so in school, at home, I barely.
This is when
ate.
you were like 7 or 8.
Yeah, 8. I didn't talk. So we had to we moved. We moved to another town afterwards. But yeah, I didn't cry. I did nothing. I was just emotionless for like almost 2 months, a month and a half or something like that. And my mom told me one day, randomly, I was like after a dentist appointment or something like that, we were in the car, and suddenly I just looked at my mom and I just started crying. And my mom knew that finally I was able to let it out and move on. And I was fine after that. But yeah, it was like a epic traumatic moment for me when my grandmother passed away. So now that I'm thinking about it, it felt like that throwing up was sort of like a symbol for me. I think as a kid, that's what I put as the symbol of bad things happening if I threw up. But now maybe if I were to connect it even bigger, maybe it was a shared death experience. Maybe it was something that moment was also when maybe my grandmother passed. Like maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Absolutely. You wouldn't be the first. This kind of sharings are all over the place, like many, many people. And I had actually people coming to me sharing very similar things after I kind of opened up the topic, and they have never shared it with anyone else.
Yeah. This is very private stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so and actually even some very close family members then shared with me just recently, after I kind of talked about these things, that they saw when their grandfather died, they saw the soul going out of the body, and as a child, and they kind of didn't question it, like it was like the normalest thing in the world in this moment, and they even didn't share it. But now, like decades later, when this topic comes up, they actually, I remember that was happening, and I saw it. It kind of went out like a cloud through the window, and also this was a phenomenon that was described in the book from Raymond Moody as some people see it as a pink cloud, some as a gray cloud, but it is something that many people see.
I also remember reading, without being specific to what it was, but I remember reading something about kids in general. They tend to be more attuned to these kind of things. And also there have been actual research done on certain kids that they're kids, but they talk about past lives.
Yes,
like it was
absolutely.
so clear. Like one was a pilot, and
exactly,
and they talk
That's
so
James
clearly.
Leininger.
Yes, James Leininger. Yeah.
So this is a very, very funny story, or interesting story, where he is talking as a 3-year-old. He starts having nightmares, and these nightmares always are like he's kind of pressing against something with hands and feet in his dream and screaming. He wants to get out. And his mother does not know what that is, and then all of a sudden he starts talking about he was shot with his plane, and that's how he died. And the father, he was an HR manager, very, very rational, and he said, "I don't want this shit at home, and this cannot be, and I don't accept that." But then he started asking him a little bit when he started saying, "Yeah, I was shot," and he said, "Who shot you?" He said, "Well." And he kind of like went like that. The Japanese, like as if, how can you ask me that stupid question? And then he said, "So how come you know?" Well, because
how old was this? How old was he?
He was 3 or 4.
3 or 4, something like that.
And
right?
then he said, "So how do you know?" Well, because of the red sun on the flag. I don't know if he said on the flag, but because of the red sun. And then he said, "So what kind of airplane were you flying?" And he said something, it wasn't Cessna, but something like the name of the aircraft. And then he said, "Okay, so what was the kind of the boat you were kind of starting off from? What was the name of that boat?" And he said Natoma or something like that, like directly. And so do you know also anyone? Did you have any friends there, or for example, this guy Peter, blah blah blah, and then he looked that all up, and everything was correct. And by the way, one other thing that was very interesting was that he would always draw these pictures of him flying and being shot and falling into the ocean with his plane. And then he would sign it with James 3. And he would also be asked, so what was your name? And he said, James. And then when he was signing with James 3, the parents asked him, why do you always put this 3 behind? And he said, well, because I'm the third James. And parents didn't make sense of that. Then when the father did this research on the details he was told, he found out that there was just one pilot on the ship that was shot by the Japanese who was called James Jr. So he was in fact the third James. And what they then found out that the sister of this pilot was still alive. So they went to see the sister.
Oh shit.
And he directly, to this old lady, whereas as a child you would normally be a little bit shy with someone you don't know, he directly went and kind of hugged her and asked her about the one drawing of their mother, that if she still has that drawing that the mother drew of them, and she had it, and like unbelievable.
That's crazy. I don't remember that part.
Unbelievable. There were even cases where someone where the child was still able to find the murderer of them when they passed away in the same village, and they knew even where the the knife was buried, and so they could find that person who murdered them when they were in this past life. So there are stories like that. Like, it's unbelievable what exists there if you really dive into that.
Yeah, that's
and
crazy.
Many of these cases of the children are more of the violent deaths. So maybe it has some connection with that because in a violent death that then the children somehow remember, or this amnesia doesn't work that well, or we don't know.
No, I want to get to reincarnation, because I think that's fascinating in terms of not just talking about reincarnation itself, but like the implication of it in terms of maybe how we live. So you talked about there's death, and then there's an afterlife, and then there's a between life phase, right? What is that between life phase?
Well, here I would recommend to listen to some of the interviews of Michael Newton, because he was really specialist of this time in between. What I can say is that it is a time where you... so one thing that he would say, or that many people that have been studying this would say, that we all have a spiritual guide, and you would have, in this time, before you incarnate, you have kind of a discussion with your spiritual guide or some other spiritual helpers about how you want to design your life, because kind of the life is planned in some ways. You always have free will, but there are some kind of markers of events that are supposed to happen so that you can evolve. And so the meaning of life in that way would be to learn, to experience, to have the soul evolve, and to make experiences cannot make in a world where there's only love. So this duality is there to actually make experiences, and the incarnation can then happen together with your soul family, and the soul family means these people are incarnating with you together, either as parents, as siblings, and it can next time it can be another way around. It can be even perpetrator and victim, one time this way, the other time this way. Then there's the whole topic around karma, that it all has to balance off, and that some people volunteer to go into this role in order to have their karma balanced off. And the interesting thing is that there is something like a so-called contract that you make at the time. For example, one time there was one woman who had a accident, and then really had so much pain, and then she had that near-death experience, and she didn't want to go back. and she was there sitting at a beautiful lake and environment in kind of on the other side, and didn't want to go back. But her spiritual guide was there next to her and said, "But you agreed you would go back." And she said, "I don't remember. What do you mean? I don't want to go back." And she kind of argued with the spiritual guide. And that's, by the way, something you hear very often from the near-death experiences, that they are really in resistance of going back. They don't want to go back, but they are sent back, and they are told you have to go back. And
going back is like going back to the life.
To the life. And then she was shown a situation where she was kind of there was like meeting with other people where she was agreeing to have this life or signing the contract of having this kind of life, and there was one thing that she actually was an atheist, and she wanted to experience how it is like to be an atheist, but she wanted in this lifetime to return to faith. And so she had several markers in her life where she could have had that transformation or that turning point, but she didn't take it. And the last marker was then this, like the fallback or the plan B or C, was this accident that was then happening to make her come back to faith. And that was like one thing that she could see in this near-death experience also, where she was kind of signing up to that kind of life. And that is something you hear a lot from near-death experience people.
I don't know. I don't know what to believe, right? But like, I'm open to everything, and I think if I were to believe in reincarnation, even the idea of karma, I think it really impacts how you go about your current life, and you kind of reassess everything. When you mentioned this idea of like the life review, yeah, I don't know. Like, if I were to look at my life now, the life lived so far, I don't know, like if you were to review...
Just utter disappointment. But maybe that's a good way to think. Like you said, after you started talking about the life review and how that's a topic that is real interesting to you. And I can see how that could form as a positive way of living your life. Like you mentioned before, you know you're going to have a life review. You're in a crossroads right now in life.
But isn't that also very religious in for certain religions? Is that this idea of judgment? Like, you will be judged?
First of all, you can say that the golden rule that you shouldn't do to others what you wouldn't do to yourself is definitely confirmed in the life review. Yeah. But the one thing that the near-death experience people always say is they are not judged. So there are some hellish experiences as well that are not so much talked about, but they exist as well.
Well, please talk about those, because like we've been talking more or less like positive experiences, I guess, like transformative in a positive way. There's got to be a flip side to that, right? So what are some accounts of those?
So there are some experiences where people share a near-death experience where they were going through hell, or they were in hell, or then got out.
Were there accounts that they gave to what their experience in hell was like?
The hellish experiences were like from some creatures and from heat and from people screaming. And,
so fire and brimstone.
Yeah,
is
really
still
like And one thing
that's real, right?
Yeah, and the one thing that many people say is that what you really believe in, or what really the deep belief is, this comes up then in this moment.
But I would say that weakens almost the case for this near death, because if everyone's experiences, and I'm not saying it is, but like if everyone's experiences are like shaped by their predispositions to believe in certain things in the first place, then I think that makes that gives more of a case for the materialist side.
But there were also cases where people that, for example, were from a different religion and had completely no idea, for example, about the Bible really, because they were Hindus
Yeah.
and so on, that they would go through this and then somehow meet Jesus like that. So this is also existing. So there is a lot of different combinations where you couldn't say that this is based on the belief. And it's also the way that people that had a belief come out of this near-death experience, they remain spiritual or they become really spiritual, but they give up their belief or their, let's say, the dogma of their religion. Yeah.
For the people that are really in this deeply, has there been a summary or theory that encompasses this all? An explanation? Something that's a little more like
E equals MC squared kind of thing for this.
An explanation. What's the end all be all?
Well, the one thing is we're energy, and energy cannot be killed, energy cannot die, and it lives on. That would be one way of looking at it. Many come back with this, actually the only thing, the one thing that is real is love, and that love is really the answer to everything. So
Wait, let me chime in here for a second, because I think we started this all wrong. I think you and I, Howie, we started this all wrong. This dynamic, right? Because I'm sensing now that it'd be more productive, and I think really what Tilman came here for was to have a discussion with us about this, because we're throwing questions at him as if he is the all-knowing answer and has the whole playbook written for this, right? Like no one does, right? Like we're all just speculating here, right? We're all just talking about our beliefs here based on our experiences and what we believe and what we've consumed so far. And so I think instead of just throwing questions at him, let's just let's have a discussion, right? Like what does this mean, and how do we internalize this ourselves as just human beings?
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, because what I'm my fear. Let's just start from there. Okay, let's start from here. One of my greatest fears in life, and this is real, and this isn't just something that came about because we're talking about this today. This is something for many years now. I kind of worry about
pooping in your pants.
Well, in addition to that.
Okay.
Is that if this idea of if you have pain and suffering, the more pain and suffering in this life you have, the more rewarded you will be in your next life. This kind of concept, if that is sort of real, I worry about myself for my next life, because regardless of the pain and suffering I have gone through in my own life, it pales in comparison to real pain and suffering. I have lived a very privileged life. I am very abundantly aware of that. And so I feel is luck and privilege and comfort. I somehow kind of believe that to be a finite thing in one's life. And the more you use of it now, the less you will have of it later. And so I look at my current life and how privileged I have been in my current life. And I'm just wondering, well, am I just going to have the shittiest next life because I was able to reap all the benefits of this?
It's like a cycle.
In this life. Yeah, it's like cycle. That's a legitimate concern I have, if this whole kind of reincarnation thing is real. I don't know. Do you guys ever think about that?
Yeah, so I also live a very privileged life, and I also sometimes think maybe there's just something still waiting out for me that...
Yeah, when is the shoe about to drop, right?
Yeah. And at the same time, I once heard it's something like, so those people have kind of a break for a while. Yes, maybe it's this, and yes, maybe the next life will be harder. It could also be that we have just the hardest lives behind us. We just don't know. So my suggestion would be just to enjoy and to live this life to the fullest. And I think one thing that I have heard, or not, I have heard many times in this context is the importance of really living out your potential and your true self, being yourself, express that, and have no fear. By the way, this is actually an interesting one, that the one sentence that is mentioned the most in all religions is "don't fear, don't be
fear.
afraid."
Don't be afraid, really, across all religions.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of what? Is there a special, or
Anything.
just don't be afraid in general?
Yeah.
Like sometimes I think everyone has their own translation, and that's the beauty of life, right? What you just said, don't fear. All the listeners out there are going to have that as translated differently. So maybe for me, it'd be like, if you want to do something, like
Well, Howie lives in a constant state of fear. I'm not even joking. You live in a constant state
you
of fear.
mentioned that before.
Yeah,
you have mentioned
because
that before.
True.
So I translate that to, if I have something I want to do, then just do it. Don't be afraid, right? So that's my translation. Maybe somebody else would be, there's a bully, that's bullying you. Do not be afraid of the bully. Face your bully, or whatever it is.
Or don't fear death.
Yeah,
right.
or something. So I think everyone's gonna have a different translation to that.
I don't know. But I find that hard to kind of rectify, in the sense that I think there are a lot of, I don't know, I'm not a religious expert, and nor am I all that religious myself. So from my very little and ignorant understanding of some religions, I find that fear is a big part in a lot of religions, in terms of the judgment aspect, in terms of the idea of hell and punishment, right? I mean, there is that concept in different forms that exist in many religions. And so what is that? That is fear. That is instilling some sort of fear in you to be a better person, or to live more morally, or abide by some
society,
sort of rule.
I feel like society would break down if everyone was without fear.
Yeah.
There would be no society. The modern society as we know it, it's run by fear. It's run by people in power.
But that's just how primitive we are as a species, right? That like we have to be controlled by fear.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of like going to the topic we talked about last time about psychological safety, and actually there is more potential you can bring out if you feel safe, if you don't have fear. So because fear is always occupying some resources for the image management, which is actually not your true self. So I understand that really as an invitation to be as authentic as possible. And I could say that I could, for example, now be also afraid of potential repercussions of my image, my reputation, of going out and talking about that. But I'm not, because I believe that this is important, and I believe so deeply in it. It's part of my authenticity to talk about the things I believe and I think are worthwhile sharing. So I don't care about that part now. And if there are repercussions, I take them, as much as I took the repercussions of going to China and paying the price that this cost. But it was something of a decision that I took out of courage, curiosity, and wanting to also bring out and express my full potential, because I felt like where I was, I couldn't fully express my potential. I really want to encourage everyone to step out as much as possible out of that comfort zone and out of that maybe fear-based container, and trying to, be more themselves.
Do you believe, I think I know the answer, but do you believe like in a higher power? You know, I think of the universe, right? Our known universe, at least, and the boundaries. And then we think about, okay, well, what's beyond the boundaries? It's hard to kind of wrap your mind around all this, right? Because we can talk about like the details of like, okay, a certain person having a near-death experience, great. But I think all this, and if all this is true, whether we're talking about the reincarnation, the afterlife, the time between lives, the life review, if all that is true, then it just feels like then there is a higher purpose to all this. There's a higher mission. There's a higher power guiding this. You talked about people having spiritual guides in their experiences. What is that about? it just seems there's something beyond what we're talking about, right? Beyond what we're acknowledging.
And this is where religious people will come to you and be like, you poor soul.
Well, no, this is where people will invoke God, right?
Well,
this is where religious people will invoke God.
And this is where the
for
argument will
unknown.
come in, and they'll say, you being an atheist or agnostic, obviously, you're not a religious person. You're coming in as an unguided soul.
No,
You
but
ha-
even religious people don't know. Like religious people will say, well, that's God's plan, right? Like you just have to trust and have faith.
Yeah, I mean, maybe one thing that is very interesting. I have recently come across a interview with Grok, with someone interviewing Grok on the evolution and the probability of the evolution happening as it is described in the materialistic way, and actually finding out with Grok and with the
For people that don't know, Grok is
Grok,
Elon
Elon's
Musk's
AI,
right? Yeah,
yes.
Grok.
And that under pure observational science, pure logic, and mathematical probability, it is nearly impossible that the evolution with how everything happened in the world, how every creature developed, that this could have happened in the lifespan of the Earth. And the answer was there is intelligent design, or there is some higher power taking or influencing this. And I thought that very interesting because it was. I will share that link with you. It was very, very interesting, this interview. And
So Grok was saying this?
yes, so this
That
guy
there is
was
an intelligent
interviewing.
design
yes,
to this?
Yes. And he would also say that if you would ask him as a normal user without going into, please really analyze it really logically, only observational science and purely mathematically, he would have answered something else. He would answer it something like, yeah, there is this, and actually it's all evolution, because it's the popular view, and that's what he's programmed to say. So
That's what he was trained on.
Yeah, very interesting.
But I think just the progression of technology now, a lot of people are saying that as the technology continues and the laws of physics gets exposed even more, and there's even more laws that come out, and that will eventually start to give maybe additional explanations or additional theories of what life means, and what are we, and what are the why are we here, and stuff like that.
And certain things that would be categorized as paranormal or supernatural now will just be scientific later, right?
Yeah, it very well could, because it could be explained.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying I believe this, but we kind of talked about this a while ago when David Grush first came out and started talking about aliens.
It's a whole nother rabbit hole.
Exactly. And
we can talk about that next time.
Well, we talked a little bit about that, and when it was unfolding, and one of the things that was discussed was, or maybe I would say hinted at, was the idea of like either it's parallel universes or something that's something that is existing in parallel to what we know as reality. And that idea of coming in between realities could explain, if that became fact, it could explain the ideas of spirits and coincidences and the that feeling of somebody's here with you or whatever, like these different unexplainable happenings that happen in our life, right? So yeah, the possibilities are endless, and I think as time goes on, even another big one that people are hoping will get answered is this a simulation, right? Maybe we're overthinking it. This is just another simulation, and there have been some scientific studies that, mathematically speaking, what amounts to the universe and all the material things here can be equated to ones and zeros, and they're all mathematically kind of equate.
Yeah, maybe like the time between lives is this your break outside the simulation.
Yeah.
And like you're just like in a room with a guy like hooked up to all these wires, and he's like, okay, well, what did you learn? Like, what'd you think? What do you mean? Okay, let's plug you back in and let's try this again. And you go back in, and that's your new life.
You have a lot of conversations about, and you mentioned it earlier in the conversation about how time gets truncated, and the idea and the explanation of time, it's irrelevant, right? Time becomes one. It becomes a matter of fact, an instance.
There is so much more out there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a rabbit hole, and it's fascinating because it's adventurous to always discover new things when you think you know it all now.
I've gone a little bit down the rabbit hole of people who train themselves to be able to lucid dream at will. And it's almost like a superpower to be able to do that. I mean, have you ever done lucid dreaming
No,
before?
I haven't. But there's something else with lucidity, terminal lucidity, also very interesting term that people that are, for example, having dementia or even having a mental illness that they cannot even talk or anything, that in their final stage before they pass away, they all of a sudden become lucid and become kind of like normal. And you can talk and you have a normal conversation with them as if they were normal. And some relatives then become enthusiastic, like, oh my God, he's back. He's like now. But this is actually just the sign that they then pass away. But this is also a phenomenon no one can explain. And it's very well proven that this exists, that people have sometimes it happens, it doesn't happen always, but sometimes people who have dementia and shortly before they die, they are very clear. You can have a normal conversation with them as if nothing happened before. And even with people who have mental disabilities, there are some proven cases or some well-documented cases of that. It's also something unexplainable. But it also would say support the theory of kind of the soul being outside, or that there is the brain is not necessarily just the real.
They were just trapped
thing.
in the physical form of the body that was disabling them. But once the soul left the body,
like the transmitter was a bit broken or something,
like that.
But the soul is still fine.
So each time not each time, but I very often come across new things that I haven't heard of, even though I studied for such a long time, and I think that's just exciting.
I remember, I'll just share a real quick story. I was 24 or 5, I would say, and I was visiting my mom here in Shanghai. I was living in New York, and like we already said, my family is very into fortune telling and stuff like that. And she took me to go see somebody. And, back then I didn't think anything of it. I was just like, yeah, whatever, fine, let's go, And it was some blind guy. It was in the boondocks somewhere in Jiangsu. It was like in the mountains. It was very remote. I get there and we go through this process. And I'll never forget one of the first things that he was saying. He pictured me on stage, some sort of entertainment with a crowd of people, and they're all looking at me, and I'm kind of interacting with them and stuff like that. And at that time, I was the lead singer of my band, and I right away I was like, okay. And
did your mom tell him anything about you?
No.
Okay.
No. But anyway, he said that, and I was like, that's kind of weird, right? And then continuing on, he started saying more about my future and stuff like that. And then I've told you some of the things that he said that pretty much is accurate now that I'm older and stuff like that, and I'm looking back at. So to me, it is a bit weird, right? It's unexplainable. It is interesting. I do believe that the world that we live in is not what we believe in, and I mean what we know. There's a lot more to it that we don't know, and we just know a speck, just like you said. And I think things that Tilman has been talking about is just another star in the sky that has yet to be revealed. Like I said, there's a lot of stories that you've shared that are quite believable, and I've seen and heard and experienced things myself as well that if you connect the dots, they do feel quite real, right? And it's just perception though, because everybody perceives things differently. But it is fascinating. It's a fascinating route to go down, and I do hope that more things get more explained better, and the curtains get unveiled as time goes on, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think at the very least, you got to have an open mind about it.
Yeah.
All right. Cheers, Tilman. Thanks again for coming back.
That was fun.
Watch like Tilman just like slowly disappear and lift up and go. Like he's been dead this whole time. And this is just his aberration telling us to come on coming on the podcast and talking to us. Imagine this. Like we play back the recording, like I'm editing the episode, we play back recording, and on his mic it's just static and silence the whole time. And it's just us talking and responding and talking to him, but there's nothing picked up on his mic. Imagine. Oh my God. I love stories like that. I love good ghost stories.
And then we become the story.
Yeah.
What we just experienced becomes a story.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, we'll see.
We'll see.
Again, Tilman, thank you so much for sharing.
It was a fantastic pleasure. Really, really enjoyed it very much.
Okay, I'm Justin.
I'm Howie.
Be good. Be well. Peace.